So, everybody, we are called Veil of Sound, and we're called Veil of Sound because we try to give you some of the, I don't want to say most underground, but bands that you might not have heard of before. And today, I want to give you one of those that you should listen to. They had their pre-order for the upcoming album a few weeks ago, and I'm very, very happy to have Cameron from The Infinity Ring here with me today. So, Cameron, thanks for joining the show.
Thank you very much for having me.
You're welcome. The first question that we always ask, what is the band merch that you're wearing today?
Interesting. I'm wearing a jacket at the moment, but earlier this morning, I was wearing, this is a little plug, but one of my closest friends, he plays under the moniker Rock Gut God. I was wearing his t-shirt earlier today.
Okay. Yeah, that is exactly the thing that you should do in places like that. Like either plug yourself, your own band, your own projects, or friends. I don't have to plug anybody because I'm not friends with anybody. Nobody likes me, but I can say that I'm wearing a very old school Under Oath shirt. Second question, where are we catching you right now, Cameron?
I'm currently in Western Massachusetts. I live closer towards the Berkshires. It's about 2 hours from New York City, about an hour and a half from Boston.
So if you had to associate yourself with one of those metropolitan areas, not because of proximity, but maybe because of attitude, which one would you choose? Boston or New York?
I would say predominantly Boston. I was living in Boston for 9 years before I actually moved out this way. So let's stick with Boston. Although, huge fan of New York City.
Who isn't?
Exactly.
So I have to ask that as an opener because I like the name of the band, The Infinity Ring. And of course, I had to come up with something similar. So what do you think of like Celtic knots or the simple infinity loop sign in mats or the figure 8?
Great question. We're all, I can speak for myself, we're all very much interested in alchemy and mysticism, things of that nature. Personally, those symbols don't hold a huge value for me. I think with the band name, the word infinity, just kind of the idea of time being greater than myself, greater than existence, it's just fascinating. It's a powerful word. That's kind of where it lands.
So I read a very interesting quote a few days, and I think that might even apply to what you just said, and also to your band. Somebody spoke about art and music, and he said that when we use art, we use it in order to decorate space. When we use music, we try to decorate time. Is that also something where you go to, like making music that seems to be timeless? Because that's what the Infinity Ring is to me. It's music that could also have been like 20 years earlier or 20 years ahead in the future.
Oh, I appreciate that. Yeah, absolutely. I don't think we aspire to make something of our generation necessarily. I would say, honestly, I don't give it too much thought, but that's a beautiful quote. When writing the songs, I don't have too much thought, but I wouldn't say I'm attempting to make anything that is contemporary or anything of that nature.
So you've already mentioned that you're a relatively new band. Correct me if I'm wrong. Started 2 years ago, 3 years ago?
Yeah, the ideas of this project have been, I've been writing material for it for a while. I think our first introduction to placing music out was about around 3 years ago. So yeah, fairly new.
So can you tell us a little bit about the background of the people involved, or also, if that is too much to ask, a little bit about your personal musical background?
Sure. I've played a lot of different genres, for lack of a better word. I was doing some folk music for a while, then was playing some industrial music. This band feels like a culmination of both ideas, which is kind of a place I'd wanted to get to. Was writing these songs for a while, with no larger intention aside from just like feeling the urgency to create them. And to answer your question regarding band members, yeah, I have 3 really solid. We are sort of a collective. We have plenty of people that come in for recording sessions and such, and live settings. For the moment, I would say there's like a core 4 of us, including myself, which we all play vast different styles as well. Our guitar player, he has a punk band called Sadist. He also does some solo body music called Byproduct. Our keyboardist has 2 projects called Octalisk and Thanatropics, which are also kind of industrial body music adjacent. And our drummer plays in this wonderful band called God.
So you said that it's more like a collective with people coming in for record sessions. Then, of course, the question must be, how does the songwriting for the Infinity Ring go? Is there like a main songwriter, or is it the core members that do it together?
That's a great question. A lot of the songs start predominantly in my hands, usually as simple as just a guitar, which I more or less view as like a vehicle. The guitar sort of is a vehicle to this bigger picture I might have in my mind. There might be moments where I'm strumming 2 chords back and forth, but I can more or less kind of see through rhythms and overtones that are in the guitar where some of the other instrumentation might take the song. So a lot of the times it starts that way. I'll bring it to our drummer. We can kind of find a little more body and structure that way. And I absolutely leave a lot of space for improvising when it comes to studio work or like the actual recording of the songs. A lot of it is faith-based. I know the guys and other people I'm working with are, talented musicians. I trust them. I trust them with helping me get the song through the finish line. And there's been moments I'm very surprised with ideas I hadn't thought of that become culminations of the songs. Yeah, it's a really interesting process. I guess the last thing I'll say regarding it is like, I try to not suffocate the songs. So we do write them with this sort of urgency as it's happening, in the sense of we don't make demos of these songs and pass them back and forth for months, which some other people, that may be their writing process, and that's great too. From personally what I've learned and what feels correct in this setting is to more or less just kind of write these songs off instinct and like primitive ideas that arise. So
let me then ask that, as I already had the pleasure of listening to the record, which everybody should listen to, by the way, when it's coming out. Everybody should listen to it. I already mentioned it to you. I have like a very ecclesiastical feeling. It sounds a little bit like it has been recorded in a church, although I know it hasn't. And it's also very eclectic. So when you go into the studio, do you have a sound vision if you don't have a song vision?
Big time. You know, I do hear back to the overtones that I'll like hear on the guitar. As I mentioned, as it feels like a vehicle, it's like I may know certain parts I'm playing, but I can hear these overtones in the strings or in the lower ends of the guitar that I want to more or less pull out in other instrumentation, whether that's a cello or whether that's like a Hammond organ or even percussive elements. So short answer is that yes, we do feel that in the studio. I more or less go in with a bigger picture in mind and can hopefully capture those sounds fairly quickly.
And the last question to that must, of course, be, is the Infinity Ring more about sound than song?
Absolutely.
That's very interesting, because I think in a way you nailed that on the album, because there are very many different things in there, very many different styles or genres. But it all culminates under, as I said, a somewhat ecclesiastical sound, which I think is also in part due to, for example, your keyboardist doing a great job on the record. You all do, but I love the way the keyboard is used on many, many of the songs.
Wonderful.
Now, for those of you who are interested in how I got to know the Infinity Ring, is first of all, Cameron sent me an email, and he mentioned a collaboration that he did with somebody who was on this show like 2 months ago. A young lady that you probably all have heard of, called Jarboe. Now, Cameron, how did it happen that that collaboration came to fruition for the Infinity Ring?
I'll give you the short-winded version of it. It was the blessing of the pandemic that we were more or less in. We had been working on some material that we necessarily didn't have, let's just say, a home for, or knowing which direction we were going sort of with it. I did know in my mind that I could tell that the song didn't call for my voice. You know, I view voice as an instrument. So I wasn't personally feeling like an inclination to sing over this song. And being fans of Jarboe's work, such a beautiful career of work that she's done, I reached out via email, and that's kind of the beginning of it. From there, we went back and forth, kind of sharing lyrical ideas and concepts, not really full pages of lyrics or anything, more or less like concepts was the big thing. And yeah, I'm very pleased with how it came out and that it all happened in general.
I also like the way that this is a very good example for what you just said. You know, you didn't press her voice into deep-minded lyrics. You gave her free rein, and there is a lot of vocalization, a lot of harmony, and very often there is a lot of emotional value without words, which is something that I like a lot. And that is definitely very, very awesome. But tell me, how did it feel when you got the answer, "I'm in"? How was that moment for you?
It was wonderful. Yeah, it was months after I'd sent the email. I feel, as most artists, we have days we feel really good about what we're creating, and then days that you feel indifferent about it. I do recall sending the email on a day I was feeling good, and almost completely forgot I had even sent it, to an extent. Like, sent the email, hadn't heard anything for a while, and then it was just not at the forefront of my mind. So months later, um, I remember I was at an airport in Reno, actually, and
Nevada.
yeah, I was out in the national parks for a little bit, at Yosemite. And yeah, I got the email right before I boarded the flight. And, I was ecstatic. She was down to collaborate, and just more or less understood the vision. I think that was the big part, was that I could just tell from her response that she understood what I was trying to create. And that just felt wonderful.
I can totally imagine. So you were elevated in two kinds of ways.
Absolutely.
And tell me a little bit about it. Did you record in the same room, or was her part recorded somewhere else in New York City or in Atlanta?
Yeah, we recorded separately, again, due to the whole pandemic situation. We had some of the material, or the song more or less started with, there's like these swirling violins
Yes.
throughout the track. And that was the main vision that I wanted to ideally start the song with. I was like, the rest will culminate over time, but I kind of want these free form violins almost sounding like they're like stabbing and fighting one another. That's just where it started. So she had that portion of the track and added her vocals. I believe at a studio out near her.
Probably. And then the whole thing was released on a pretty new label called Federal Prisoner, which has a very, very diverse roster. There is Greg Puciato, the former singer of Dillinger Escape Plan. They also re-released one of my favorite metalcore albums of the early 2000s, one of Poison the Wells records. And there is also God of War. There are some other acts, and then there is you. I mean, like, first of all, there is no Red Thread in that roster, I would say, which is cool. I like that in a way. But how did it feel for you to be on that roster? Do you think you fit it, or do you just simply embrace the diversity?
Great question. I absolutely love what they do over there. Jesse Draxler, one of the label owners, him and I have gone back and forth in communication many of times. I very much enjoy his artwork. I think we fit in because they've more or less curated a vision that does whatever they want, which everything falls under this ominous sort of dark ethos. But I think we have a little space there. I'd like to think so.
And now the record, again, pre-orders are up, the full length will be released by Profound Lore.
Correct.
I mean, like, you, from being a band that, excuse me to say so, nearly nobody knew, releasing an EP on a very small but nice label, Federal Prisoner, and now you jump with your debut to Profound Lore. How did that happen?
No, feeling very, very fortunate from all the love and support. A close friend of mine had connected me with Chris at Profound Lore, and before we really discussed even working on the album, we had some email trails, just kind of going back and forth, talking about, you know, art and things of that nature, talking about the as simple as it is, like the vision of Infinity Ring, and kind of they seemed, you know, Chris, great dude, and he seems like the perfect fit, someone that really understood, you know, the whole concept behind the project. So it felt like no better home and no better choice.
You recorded the record at God City. Of course, I mean, like proximity-wise, that makes sense. It's in Massachusetts. But of course, it's also the home of one of the great guitarreros of our time, you know, Kurt Ballou. Did you record everything at God City, or was something recorded somewhere else?
I would say we did about 90% of it at God City. We did a lot of synths and these other kind of, not all of them, but a handful of them, just at like our home studios, and had brought them back there. But yeah, a majority of the album was tracked there.
And I mean, like, God City is a very, very, very good recording studio. We all know that. And it's also known for a certain kind of big sound. However, I would be interested in how you created a sound that is big, but differently big. It is not dense as, you know, some of the hardcore stuff that Kurt produces. It is vast, and it stretches upwards and outwards at the same time. And how did you manage that at God City? How long did it take you to find that sound in God City?
Yeah, so we worked really closely with one of our really good friends, who's also the engineer, Zach Weeks, on, you know, mapping out what soundscapes we were trying to not only identify, but also just make sure we really hit the mark on when it came time to performing and recording. I appreciate you saying that it does sound dense, but, you know, maybe a different kind of dense, because I think that was what we were going for. Is we did want it to have a very, I guess I'll just use the word real, a real feel. We tracked some instruments simultaneously, which I think helps create that, you know, whether someone like me, I feel like I can usually feel it in the music when there's like that spine of two instruments being tracked at the same time. So I think we just tried a lot of different recording tactics there, which I'm very pleased with the outcome and the overall sound.
Something that I have to ask, being a history teacher as well, is whether you know the German word Schellenbaum, because it sounded to me as if you used that on some of the tracks very frequently.
Interesting. Yeah, so I am familiar with that instrument. Excuse me. Yeah, I'm familiar. We did not use that. We have a lot of, I personally collect a lot of world instruments. I have a bunch of hammered dulcimers, some baglamas, some different sized lutes, different mandolins, things of that nature, a lot of stringed instruments. I believe the sound you might be referring to is we actually have a hand pan drum, which we actually used on the Jarboe material, and we used on a decent amount of tracks on the new album. A beautiful instrument nonetheless. But I'm familiar with the instrument you're talking about. I would love to try to play one. I've never seen one in person. I have seen one actually in a museum. Give me a hot moment while I log my brain. There's a museum in New York City that I frequent, and I'm blanking on the name at the moment. It is.
So while you are thinking about the name, for those people who are not from Germany and don't know the term, we're basically talking about the combination of a tambourine, something which sometimes resembles a little bit of a snare. So, and most important, tambourine and a monkey stick. So it's like several percussive instruments combined into one instrument, very often associated with medieval times, and it gives a certain sound as if you hit a small snare, a tambourine, and a lot of jingle jangle bells at the same time. And that's there are a few tracks on the record where, especially at the beginning of tracks, I have a feeling as if the drummer hits three instruments at the same time and they make it sound like a cello.
Sure. Yeah. I recall the museum. It is the Rubin Art Museum, and I have seen one of those behind glass. But to your point, we used a lot of. We have a percussionist that plays with us sometimes as well as like a secondary drum sort of situation. So, yeah, we went pretty crazy with. I think we wanted a lot of those meditative kind of rhythmic aspects to feel like things are starting and falling over each other, especially on the percussion side. So yeah, even some of those, I let them do their thing. So who knows, maybe down the line we'll have to get one of those, pull it out.
Well, it would make life easier for your drummer. I've already mentioned it. There is a certain kind of, let's say, medieval feel to some of the songs, some of the soundscapes. One could also say a Gothic feel. I'm pretty sure that is not a coincidence, right? So this kind of Gothic feeling to it.
Sure. Yeah, I think there's intention behind that. I would also say maybe it is again, I can see that, yeah, for sure. When people compare us to Gothic or older medieval kind of sounds, although I very much like music like that, I don't think I personally write with intention for that. Like, I wouldn't say that is the I wouldn't say I write with intention for it to sound that way. I would say I think a lot of those elements and overtones kind of reveal themselves while maybe collaborating with like-minded people, and while also, a lot of those older hymns and things of that nature are in a 3/4 or a 6/8 time signature, which we tend to play in, and I think that can give the adjacency to sounds like that.
So, were there any specific musical influences?
Yeah. So a really important album to me, actually, that I remember hearing about when I was in my early 20s was actually Nico's album, Desert Shore. And I know that album, for me, when I first heard it, it was all the harmonium, those organ sounds. There's absolutely a free form element to it. If you listen to what she is doing with her left hand, ideally the bass of the piano, there's this kind of free form aspect to it. It's not, it's not, I don't believe it was recorded ported to a click or anything of that nature. And there's much music we listen to similar to that. Scott Walker is a big influence. I wouldn't say it's hard because we all kind of pay attention to different things at different times. I would say there's certain moods that I go through, whether I'm, driving on a sunny day, listening to like John Fahey or something, or, it could be a gloomier day and I want to listen to something a little more like meditative, which might be like, I'm a big fan of what Charlemagne Palestine does. So yeah, no, I wouldn't say there was like too many direct influences. We more or less, the songs kind of revealed themselves, and I think everyone kind of bringing different ideas to the table, and more or less just kind of waiting for the songs to reveal themselves was kind of the process here.
That is also very interesting because, doing some research and looking up stuff, I saw that sometimes, when you listen or when you look at both for fans of lists,
Sure.
that is very interesting because on the one hand, you are being connected to folk acts like Of the Wand and of the Moon, Ozzy and the Jupiter, and at the same time to shoegaze bands like Death Bells, and sometimes even to ambient acts like Drowse. So it feels to me as if the Infinity Ring is somewhere in between. Do you like that position of not being, of people not being able to associate you with certain genres or styles?
Yeah, I'm fine with whatever people. I feel like a majority of people listen to eclectic and different genres of music, so I'm fine with whatever. We live in this time where the algorithm decides things of that nature, which is really interesting. But I can see the folk elements. Shoegaze not as much, but yeah, I'm fine wherever people decide to place us, more or less. I think as long as people are listening to the songs with intent, I think that's the important part.
Let's have a little look at the themes that are being spoken about on the record. A lot of them seem to come from older legends or even sagas. We got Pan and Syrinx, we got Orpheus, we got Lazarus. So are you yourself interested in these kind of mythological figures?
Absolutely. I think alchemy and mysticism may be, something not only myself, but the rest of the group, we can all agree that we're fascinated in. Yes.
And what also struck me as if you have a liking for pairs. We got Pan and Syrinx, we got Wax and Oil, Nemesis and Nativity. You have one track or one title that is split into two parts, Tiferet, which is Tiferet Part 1 and Part 2. So is duality in some way for you a key to understanding life?
Great question. Yeah, I think that's where my brain lives most of the time, is just kind of that painful question of, why am I here? What is my existence? Like, yes, time, and like I feel the duality of just being alive, being a human is something that completely fascinates me. It terrifies me at times. It is the most beautiful, overwhelming feeling at times. Yeah.
Because it also reflects in a way, and you've been speaking about life and the duality behind life, because life always comes in pairs: birth and death, pleasure and pain, black and white. So that also refers to, for example, the idea of Lazarus, death and life and beginning happening at the same time. So is there also some kind of morbid fascination behind some of the ideas?
Absolutely. I think, absolutely, for the songs that are on this album, yeah, it's a burning question through most of it, but there are moments, I think it comes across in the material. There are songs that have a feeling of hopefulness, I hope, and also songs that have this morbid kind of undertone. And I think for most people, I know myself, that's where I feel where I am, like where I'm living in this earth, just being alive, being kind of stuck between, simplest terms, light and dark, stuck between the oldest of time, but heaven and hell, just those kind of, purgatory moments. Yeah, absolutely.
Is that then also the dichotomy of, like, we live in very, very modern times. Is there also a little bit of the dichotomy of, we live in very modern times, but very often don't understand them?
Oh, absolutely. I'm more confused with the world, and the way things are, not necessarily in a negative sense, but at times I just feel more disconnected than most, I guess.
Mm-hmm. Do you have a feeling as if that has become worse or stronger with also becoming older? So that, while you got older, that feeling got stronger?
Personally, I feel more in touch with myself and more in tune with things I choose to be in tune with, like nature. And I don't mean to be so doom and gloom on this. I do believe there's an overwhelming amount of beauty in the world. But yeah, so I don't sound like a broken record. I do think there's a lot of things we could fix in present day. And I would be lying if I said I don't have an overall fear or maybe anxiety about the actual structure and the way, as in like, the literal earth surviving. Things are burning, and there's just a lot of feels like things are a little off, I will say.
In some parts of the world, we're more off than in other parts.
Sure.
We have a few questions that we ask very often, and I also always like those questions because they very often tell you something about the musician and where he or she is coming from. So one of those questions very often is, you can cover any song you like from any artist. which one would you choose and why?
I'm gonna have to go back to the Desert Shore album by Nico. It was a very important album I was listening to during a lot of the early stages of this project. So I'll pick The Falconer, the opening track. I love that song.
And now let's reverse it. For example, maybe like on a coloration album or something like that. One artist to cover one of your tracks. Which one and why?
Ooh. I will say Diamanda Gallus, because I think her work is wonderful, and I'm sure that would be an absolutely crazy, if she chose any of our songs, I would be, if she's listening out there, let's collaborate.
Okay. And you can curate a 1-day 5-bands festival with the Infinity Ring playing at one of those 5 spots. Which spot does the band take, and which other acts take on the other 4?
Okay, these are alive artists who are alive.
Yeah, let's
we'll go with alive.
Otherwise, we'll undick Beethoven at some point.
Yeah, exactly. Okay, let's say John Cale to headline. Mm-hmm. Maybe we'll do it in this order. John Cale to headline. Brian Eno. Mm-hmm. Yoko Ono. That would be quite interesting. And I'll try to pick some more contemporaries. I really liked the new album this year by 40 Watt Sun. So let's put him on the list. And I also enjoy this.
You already album, have 4.
That's for, We're the Fifth.
Year of a Fifth.
Or there's one more. We're the Fifth. Yeah. Okay.
So, yeah, we're opening. And would you be opening, or would you play somewhere in the middle?
No, we're opening.
Why would you be opening?
We're playing with legends. We're modest. We'll kick it off.
Yeah, and also because then you can just watch them, right?
Absolutely.
Cameron, so those were the regular questions, and of course, you know that we always end our interviews with a quickfire round. You get 2 alternatives, choose one of them, and maybe give a short explanation. And we'll start off with 2 records by your collaboration partner, Jarboe. Which one would you choose, Sacrificial Cake or Anhedoniac?
Sacrificial Cake. I just love that album. Front to back.
It has a wonderful reissue out, I have to say that. Now, using her as a board to jump off of, Swans versus Neurosis.
Gotta go Swans.
Mm-hmm. As we were talking about folk acts that you are in some ways being compared to, Ozzy and the Jupiter versus Off a Wand and Off a Moon.
Interesting. I know Seth from OC. He's a nice guy, so let's go OC.
Coming from a region of legends, and also sometimes sounding like an old soul telling these legends from your region, even though it's not, you're not using the old legends, but you know, sometimes it sounds like that. Washington Irving versus Edgar Allan Poe.
Ooh. Edgar Allan Poe, for sure.
You're at home and you shall compile a playlist and you shall stick to one genre. Would you compile a playlist with Gothic artists, the whole range of it, right? Or folk artists?
Folk for me all day. That's usually what I'm listening to.
You've mentioned already that you also like some industrial acts. So how about we give you Throbbing Gristle versus Einstürzende Neubauten?
Ooh, Neubauten. Big time.
Good answer. By the way, Blixa, if you listen to this one, hit me up. I want to do an interview.
That I would listen
David
to that.
Eugene, I would do too. Man, that would be a dream come true.
Please
there
do
are
that,
not
so
many people where I say I'd wet my pants, but doing Blixa, that might happen. It might also happen with the next two because I love them. David Eugene Edwards versus Nick Cave.
Super hard. I gotta say Nick Cave, but big fan of David's work. So Nick Cave, though.
As you're from Massachusetts, Martha's Vineyard or Cape Cod?
Ooh. I got a love for Cape Cod, so Cape Cod wins that one.
When we're talking about, you've been talking about legends, so let's give you two legends: Bowie versus Eno.
Super hard.
For me, it's easy.
Maybe
you give yours and then I'll give mine.
Bowie, I think. Yeah, it's Bowie.
For me, it would also be Bowie, simply because I think there is less than a handful of artists that I would choose over Bowie. And last, we've been talking about you coming from somewhere in between metropolitan areas, between New York and Boston. The Yankees versus the Red Sox.
Oh, no question. It's the Red Sox.
What would you have said if I had given you the Patriots versus the Giants?
I'd have to go Patriots as well. I'm a very fair weather. I like sports as much as the next guy, but I'm a very fair weather fan. So when they're kicking ass, I'll watch some games. When they're losing, I'm doing a million different things instead of watching sports.
So then on the weekend, you gotta be watching the Giants because they're still in the playoffs. And now also everybody sees when this was recorded. We're in January, folks. So remember, I've already mentioned it. The pre-orders and everything is up for the record. Has been since the beginning of February. You can find the record or you can find the pre-order on Profound Lore. You can also find some stuff by the Infinity Ring on Spotify. Do yourself a favor, listen to it. And Cameron, your chance for final last words, and thanks for being on the show.
I just want to say I appreciate you having me on. I think everything you guys do is wonderful. Keep chugging along. I'm going to keep listening to other interviews. So thanks so much for having me.
Thanks a lot for doing this. Enjoy the rest of your day.
You as well. Thank you.